Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Aotearoa Whiskey Club's Whiskey 101 section. This is number 9 in our series, I believe, so I hope you guys are following along. And today we're going to talk about something that's very dear to my heart, and that is peat. And how is it that you get peat smoke and the peat flavor, that big, rich, smoky flavor, into the bottles? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And it basically starts with your malted barley gets laid out on a kiln floor. So let's just imagine that this building is a big kiln. We've got a little smokestack up top, which actually it's called a pagoda. So if ever you've been to a distillery and you drive up and you see that little smokestack looking thing, like almost like the steeple of a church, if you will. And if you see smoke billowing out, you know they're drying the malted barley over the peat fires. So they lay this malted barley out, and actually that's about how deep they'll lay it out. So they'll lay it out over this kiln floor, and the kiln floor, if you can imagine a car radiator sort of turned on its side like this, and you've got the malted barley laid over on the top, and that smoke can penetrate those little slats of metal, and it just makes its way up through, and it makes its way through the malted barley, and then of course out the chimney there. So what happens is these little kernels act as sponges, and they just soak that smoke up. Now, when it goes through the grist mill process, it gets crushed up, and that smoke follows it right on through the process. It gets crushed up, it gets put in the mash tun with the water. From there, it goes to the fermentation tanks, and that smoke continues to follow it from there into the stills, and then into the barrels to be matured. And that smoke will follow it the whole way through the process. Now, in the case of like Springbank or Talisker, let's say, the peating is not so much. You're looking at about 18 to 25 ppms, as we call it, parts per million of phenols, PHENOLS. And that's how they measure the amount of peat smoke in these big boys. Now, typically, like with the bigger guys, Ardbeg, Lagavulin, Laphroaigs, and such, I believe you're looking at more like 55, 60 ppms. And then Bemores, Taliskers, Springbanks, things like this, not quite as much of your smoke involved. So they'll only dry those, the malted barley over the peat fire, let's say 2 or 3 days for like your Springbanks and Taliskers, and more like 5, 6 days for your bigger boys, the Ardbegs, Lagavulins, Laphroaigs of the world, and so on. But that's basically it. People try to make it much more complicated than it is, and they'll say that it comes from, you know, the peaty water supply, like the peaty water that they'll use from Loch Ugadal for Ardbeg. But that's really not it. It's all about this malted barley being dried over the peat fire in a kiln, and then it just sticks to this malted barley and follows it through the whole process and winds up in this bottle as a big, beautiful, smoky whiskey. So that's it about peat. All right, guys, until next time, enjoy.